Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to call to order this meeting of the March 20th, 2012 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. There are agendas on both sides of the room. If anyone would like to pick one up and follow along with our activities tonight, we would welcome you to do so. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment on various items on our agenda. It is customary for us to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so at this point in time I would please ask everyone in chambers to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge on none other than Election Day. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Of course, that would be primary election day.
Yeah, exactly.
More to come on that. This time I ask our fine village clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Rankin? Here. Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner Schnell?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3 on our agenda, which pertains to minutes of prior council meetings. And we have one set on the agenda tonight for approval, and those are the regular council meeting minutes for March 13th, 2012. Are there any questions, comments, corrections, contortions from any members of the council? Hearing none. All those in favor? Oh, actually, I guess I need a motion first, just making sure you're all paying attention. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes will be adopted as presented. Brings us to item 4, public comments. This is the section of the agenda and the point in the evening in which we entertain comments or questions of a general nature with respect to items not appearing on our agenda tonight. So if there are any questions or comments of a general nature, we would ask that you please come down to our still brand new podium, give us your name and address, and we would welcome to hear from you.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening.
Good evening, and I'll be brief. My name is Patty Gruber. I live at 6216 Pershing, and tonight I just want to present to council for your review and record the latest signatures from our written petition against Walgreens' proposal to build at 63rd Street in Woodward. As of this afternoon, we had 530 signatures. And I also want to present to council the latest names and comments from our online petition. As of this afternoon, we had 220 names and 41 comments. And we'll continue to collect signatures, names, and comments on both petitions.
Thank you very much for sharing that.
Thanks. And that's it for me tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that. Other questions or comments of a general nature? Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Bill Robo. I live at 7800 Queens Court in Downers Grove. And like you, I exercise my privileges as a citizen of the United States and as a resident of Downers Grove and as also a citizen of the state of Illinois. And I visited my polling place this afternoon. And I was presented with a bilingual ballot. And I questioned the election judge if I could have my English ballot. I did not need a bilingual ballot. I needed an English ballot. And they told me such a form was not available. And so I took the opportunity to ask the judge to make a report to the Election Commission that I felt that I was treated with prejudice because I was not offered a traditional English ballot. I was only able to get a bilingual ballot, and I understand that the legislature down in Springfield took it upon itself to be democratic in an undemocratic way. My rights as a citizen today, my traditional rights, and I've been voting for over 50 years, and were amended, and I've taken issue with it. And I've asked the election judge at my precinct to take issue with the election board and hopefully down in Springfield. And a comment from one of the election judges was relative to the fact that one of the voters, a more senior person, a traditional person, a resident of the United States for many years, refused to take the ballot, refused to vote. And I think our democracy is suffering from this lack of respect for the traditional citizen and traditional voter. So with that, I wanted to conclude my comment. Thank you.
thank you for being here. I think the comment might be more appropriately directed to another body, but always good to see you here tonight. Any other questions or comments of a general nature? Questions or comments of a general nature? I should poll the audience and ask if everyone has voted and see if they can put their hand up. That's what I should do. I have a feeling all the folks that I'm seeing out here all voted bright and early, maybe more than once. All right, hearing no more comments of a general nature, that brings us to item 5, public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight. Brings us to item 6, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments from the audience with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda? Any questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda? Commissioner Rankin.
I just wanted to make note of some good news of all the projects that came under budget, I should say. My math was about 75,000, so that's pretty great. So I know that's just the luck of our economic conditions, but it's something to be bragging about. Thank you, Mayor.
Duly noted. That is obviously something that is quite terrific. Good to point out. And I'll just add that I appreciated getting the additional information with respect to the Google Apps and our effort to move to the cloud. That was greatly appreciated. I know that these service level agreements don't provide a lot of flexibility, but the terms seem to be specific. I think it's going to be more in the implementation than it is in the execution, but I think that the economics and the advantages and efficiencies that are gained by moving into the cloud are inevitable. And the other nice part about it is, to answer a question that was posed to us previously, it actually improves our ability to manage Freedom of Information Act requests. So it's a win-win. It costs us less, allows us to be a more efficient organization, and actually improves transparency and accessibility to our residents. So if there are no other questions or comments, then I would ask for roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda has been approved unanimously. That brings us to item number 7, our active agenda. Boy, that active agenda has really been shrinking, hasn't it?
We may call it the inactive agenda for the next time, Mayor.
We have nothing on the active agenda, but not to disappoint, we have a number of items on our first reading. So we'll go right to item 8, which is our first reading or our workshop portion of our meeting, wherein we discuss items that are presented for discussion and for potential action at a later point in time. As is customary, we usually turn this portion of the meeting over to Manager Fieldman for a presentation of the items on the agenda. Mr. Fieldman.
Thank you, Mayor Tully. There are 6 items on tonight's first reading agenda. 5 of them relate to the implementation of our current community investment plan, the FY12 budget, and more importantly, our strategic plan and long-range financial plan. They address road reconstruction projects and the 2012 bond issuance. Here to present the first 3 items related to the road reconstruction projects is our Public Works Director, Nan Newland.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm happy to be here tonight to present this item. It's the Valley View Estates Street Reconstruction and Water Main Replacement Project. It's in the Village's Community Investment Program projects ST008 and WA034 for the water main replacement. The scope of the project includes the reconstruction of streets, the replacement of water main, and some traffic calming measures within this area of the Valley View subdivision, which includes Valley View Drive, Foster Drive, Hobart Avenue, Creekside Road, Parker Avenue, Waterfall Place, and Roby Avenue. The subdivision was built in the late 1970s with a base material we refer to as POS, or pozzolanic base. It was a common material used in that time frame that really hasn't had a great long-term history with streets. It's led to some poor performance of this road and some rapid deterioration, which we will be addressing with this project. With this project, we'll also be replacing the water main. And doing both of these projects together will reduce our long-term maintenance costs and lead to much better pavement performance for this area. We issued a call for bids, and we received 6 bids, with the lowest bidder being A-Lamp Concrete Contractors at a price of $3,552,453. We They have completed satisfactory work for local municipalities. They've included road replacement and underground utilities for the villages of Skokie, Glenview, and Lombard, and they also completed the Cornell water main improvements for the village in 2005, and staff recommends award of this contract to A-LAMP. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience? Questions or comments from any members of the council? Commissioner Neustadt.
Well, just the same comment for both item A and B. Whenever we say road reconstruction, that means it's quite a disruption for the residents, but our staff as well as the contractor will be out in the field monitoring and making sure everybody knows what's happening so they can get in and out of their homes. Driveways, roadways will be pretty much torn up down to the base. I'm very pleased to see the bundling of both the roadway construction and water main replacement. I think that's a great idea to come in and just do one project to have only one disruption of the residents. And both these bids came in under our budgeted amount, as Commissioner Rankin said, with some others. So I think we're seeing some economies of scale, which is great. So look forward to seeing these.
Ditto. Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, please.
The next is a very similar project. It's in the Nottingham subdivision. It's ST011 and WA032 in the CIP. The scope of this project, similar to Valley View, includes the reconstruction of streets, replacement of water main, and some traffic calming measures to be installed in this area. It includes the streets Queens Court, Aurora Drive, Sherwood Court, Elizabeth Lane, Marie Drive, Nottingham Lane, 77th Street, and Bainbridge Drive. Some of these streets in Nottingham, I'm sure many of you have talked to residents in this subdivision. When we did our street inventory, we found some of the streets in the village that were in the worst condition in this subdivision, and we're looking forward to addressing those with these projects. We issued a call for bids, and we received 4, with the low bidder being Austin Tyler Construction, LLC, with a price of $5,489,847.76. They have satisfactorily completed various projects for the state of Illinois, as well as the city of Joliet and Will County, and staff recommends approve of this award of this contract. And just so you know, for both of these projects, we've met already twice with each of these subdivisions in the early planning stage, further along in our design, and then we'll be meeting with them one more time prior to the start of construction, as well as all the tools we'll be using to keep them informed as the project moves along and directly impacts them with the construction. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Terrific. Thank you. Any questions from any members of the audience with respect to item 8B as in boy, with respect to the Nottingham subdivision road reconstruction and water main replacement? Any questions from the audience on that matter? Yes, sir. Welcome back.
Welcome back, Mayor. Bill Roble, 7800 Queens Court in Downers Grove. As Ms. Newland referred to, I attended both the community meetings. One, I believe, was in January. The other one was in December, the preliminary and the secondary. And each one was more specific. The second one, the engineer laid out the plans that were showed the various layouts of the water main replacement, and also addressed itself to the traffic calming, particularly on Queens Court. And some of the residents, myself included, had some dialogue with the engineer and the traffic manager, Mr. Farah, regarding the choice of the traffic calming how would you call it, procedures, or implementing the particular type of traffic calming. We intend to pursue it a little further, see if we can come to a little bit more of an aggressive posture as far as the traffic calming. It has been assumed by the people on Queens Court that the traffic calming is a rather mild, kind of a let's see if it works, and we'll try something later if it doesn't work. Sort of like a middle-of-the-road traffic calming type of a approach. So we would like to address that at a future time. And myself and some of the residents of Queens Court we'll probably be addressing you if you haven't heard from us already. But it's timely. As Ms. Newland mentioned, there'll be another meeting yet, so we have plenty of time to do some tweaking. And from what I understand from the schedule, which is supposed to be implemented sometime in early part of April, it's going to start at the northeastern part of our subdivision. So the Queens Court area will be one of the last challenges to be addressed by the construction effort. I did want to compliment the staff with the amount of plans. If you were there, you could see the drawings. They were laid out at Public Works quite adequately. I was impressed with the amount of engineering that was available to be studied by the public, and I appreciate the efforts that have been done so far. And of course, I'm elated that we're moving ahead with the replacement of streets, sewers, and so forth. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your comments. Any other questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Nottingham, street reconstruction and water main replacement. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Frank Falish, 820 Prairie. Mr. Mayor, members of the commission and staff. You know, I'm wondering, it looks great on paper to see the big savings that we're making in these projects. I mean, there's $1 million this way, but that is not good, because I think we should have a better handle on the estimate for this work, because that's being way off. I think they could do a lot better. I know, especially now with the bids coming in, very good. But I think they should be a little bit more careful with their bidding. Thank you.
I knew what you meant with the estimates. And we always like it when the actuals come in under the estimates.
No, it's nice, but it limits you too.
Right, yes. Well, yeah, it's probably more of an art than it is a science, because there are a lot of unknowns, such as you just take fuel costs, and it goes into so many different things. It can swing that pendulum all over the place, but point well taken. Thank you for sharing that. All right, any questions or comments from members of the council with respect to item 8B? Hearing none, I'll take us to 8C, please.
I have one last item related to this Nottingham project. Within the Nottingham subdivision, there's approximately 10 Darien residents with right-of-way that's actually owned by the Village of Darien. And we have a long history as a village of working with the City of Darien on cooperatively doing projects with them in this area. When they're ready to do a project, we may cost share with them in the past, or vice versa. In this instance, we are moving ahead with this project, and they have agreed to cost share with us, and we have an intergovernmental agreement, which is this item between the village and Darien. And this will include spelling out that the village will be performing this work on their infrastructure, that they will allow us to make these improvements, and they will cooperate with us in the operation of the water main and allowing us to work within their right-of-way, and they will pay us the amount of $67,425 for the improvements to their right-of-way within this project. And that's summarized in this IGA, which you have before you.
And of course, IGA, for those keeping track at home, is an intergovernmental agreement.
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this item from any members of the audience? Any questions or comments from any members of the Village Council? Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, as a former alderman in Darien, in this particular area was my ward. I just want to thank the City of Darien for working with us and allowing us to continue with our plan of doing that all at one time and not do a piecemeal job. So just wanted to make that comment and thank them for the great working relationship that we have with them as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council on this item? Hearing none. Brings us to 8D as in David.
8D is consideration of an ordinance amending certain rates charged for water, and specifically, this is the deletion of the special Nottingham water rates. And here to present that item is our Deputy Village Manager, Mike Baker.
Thanks, Dave. To briefly summarize, as Dave said, this will remove the separate water rate that applies only to residents in that Nottingham subdivision. It further helps to ensure that the amount that the village pays for water does not exceed the amount that the village collects from the residents that use that water. Basically,
Something we strive for.
Exactly. It also results in a rate that is the same as all of the rate that all other residents in the village are currently paying. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Any questions or comments on this item from any members of the audience? No Darien residents in the audience? Welcome back.
Bill Roble, 7800 Queens Court in Downers Grove.
It's a hat trick for you, Mr. Roble.
Yes, I was happy to hear Mike Baker speak to the water rate issue, because it's an issue that I had called to his attention, and he studied it, because I was very much interested in the equity of the project, because when I moved to Nottingham, it was unincorporated, and then we annexed to Downers Grove, and we had a Brookhaven Water Company that supplied, and they owned the water mains and so forth, and through a long process with the village prior to most of the council members, maybe Commissioner Schnell was a member of the council at the time, we bought, Downers Grove bought the water lines from Darien and Brookhaven Water Company. And it brings to mind, when I was sitting here, that Nottingham is a divided community. It flies two flags, one to the village of Darien, one to the village of Downers Grove. And I know that our village manager has addressed the topic of annexation, and in previous years there had been some issues where the village of Darien or city of Darien made overtures to Nottingham residents to become part of Darien. And since we have an active file on annexing individuals and properties to increase our tax base here in Downers Grove, I would ask if the council would be interested in asking the mayor or the village manager and assistant village manager to do a little investigating as to whether we would identify the properties and what kind of tax base would be available to Downers Grove, to maybe ask the people with all the construction going on and all that stuff, if they would like to come on to the Downers Grove, into the village of Downers Grove, and making it uniform. And that was my thought, which was predicated by the water, since we do supply the water and to all the residents, and the water mains are ours, and you know how that goes. We've had issues like that predicated upon annexing people to the village because of the quality of the water that's offered through the Downers Grove system, as opposed to wells, etc. So I just wanted to bring this up and see if there's any interest from the part of the village to pursue this at this time, because I'm sure you're going to inform the residents that there's a unified water rate. And many of the residents are oblivious to the fact that we were paying Darien non-resident rates. So, okay, that's all I had to comment on.
Well, we appreciate that, and the village manager.
It's a lot of historical information. I thought I wanted to contribute it.
Yeah, well, it's appreciated, because I know that, many families were separated when North Nottingham separated from South Nottingham. And,
yeah.
When the neutral zone went in, it's been difficult. There's occasional skirmishes across the line, but most part of it's been a peaceful environment. But
brother fought brother, cousin fought cousin.
It's a bi-municipal.
We've actually started that conversation with Darien, and there's no short-term solution, no short-term disconnections or annexations. But in the long term, it appears that both communities are looking for the most efficient, cost-effective way to serve those residents. So in the long term, you may see some discussion go on, but in the short term, we've settled on this intergovernmental agreement.
Right, fair enough. And unification would be nice, and maybe I can say something like Mayor Weaver, tear down that wall or something.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Roll. Any other questions or comments? I think we're still on questions or comments from the council on this one, are we? No questions or comments from the council on item 8D. That brings us to item 8E as in Edward.
Which is a consideration of a resolution which is commonly referred to as a reimbursement resolution. It expresses our intent to issue bonds for the projects that we talked about tonight and future projects that are noted in our community investment plan and long-range financial plan. It allows us to reimburse ourselves for any costs related to these projects that are incurred before we actually issue the bonds. Bond discussion is scheduled for April 10th and April 17th. More information will be available at that time. Remember, these bonds will be paid for using existing revenue streams per the approved FY12 budget. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions or comments with respect to item 8E? Any questions or comments from any members of the Village Council with respect to this item? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. All these projects are going to cost money, and you didn't hear a lot of conversation about the work that needs to be done, because the work definitely needs to be done, and it's long overdue. And since we've been talking about it, and the staff has done a pretty good job of lining things up, there hasn't been a lot of conversation about that, but I do feel it necessary to talk about the other aspect of when we do work, and that's how do you best pay for it? And this has to do with specifically for bonding. And we made deep cuts a couple of years ago, and council was very proud of the fact that we didn't dip into the credit card. There were comments that, council at that time didn't even want to dip into the reserves. And residents got up to the podium here and said, thank you for not using the credit card. So the message was clear, try not to borrow any money. And then we've also heard a lot of, we need to live within our means. And so I take that to heart as well. And considering the economic situation that we've gone through the last several years, we got a taste of how bad things could be, and we lived for a number of years having a successful economy. But I think we should have learned something from the last few years. The idea that we need to go out and borrow money, I have a problem with that. We are planning on a $35 million bond. $10 million is for the water fund, and that will be paid for by the, essentially what we talked about, what's being referred to now as like a water utility. And in our conversations in long-range financial planning, I think I've said that I would support a $10 million bond for the water, the way it's being billed, the way it's being handled. I can support that, and I won't renege on that agreement for expediency's sake. But when we're talking about the $25 million bond, I think we can do a pay-as-you-go. For example, and I thank staff for all the financial statistics that I got. I haven't had time to digest and change all my figures, but I was working a few things out. Because that's essentially what we're doing. We're pulling out the credit card. Taxes and revenues were kept artificially low in the past years, and infrastructure suffered, but we can't and shouldn't keep it low by making it artificially high in the future. Let's look at some of the numbers, and if you're not a numbers person, maybe now might be the time to hit the refrigerator. I don't know, but let's make some assumptions here. $25 million, 25 years, and recently it looks like it might be like somewhere around a 3% interest, means that we will have yearly payments of $1.4 million per year, and at the end we will have paid about $11 to $12 million in interest. That means that when you're paying interest, you aren't filling a single pothole, you aren't doing anything but paying a financial institution to take care of the bondholders. That's $11 million in interest. We can get more than another fire station for that amount. and that's not what we're talking about, but in comparison. It would take us, that means about 7.5 years of interest-only payments. That means we'll be taxing or feeing our residents for 7.5 years to pay just the interest on this borrowed money. So it'll, that's 7.5 years out of 25 years. The projects we're talking about can be paid for without borrowing. If we started with nothing, and we aren't, but let's just say we started with nothing, and we use the funding that would just go from the $1.4 million payments, Valley View would be paid for in about 2 years, and Nottingham would be paid for in about 3. That would save us a lot of interest over those years, in which all payments could go to other projects. So are we going to do no work for about 7.5 years just to get this $25 million bond and do these projects? 7.5 years of just interest. And to me, that's an awful lot of money, and I think we can do a pay-as-you-go. Now, it gets complicated because we will be doing other projects, and how do we do that? We ladder things. We're going to pay part of the 2012 bonds with the 2008 bonds, and which means that we're setting up a ladder system, which means perpetual debt, perpetual interest payments. And so I think it's time that we can do it. It isn't like a mortgage on a house where you have a where you have a family that has limited funds and they can't afford to save up for 20 or 30 years to get a house, because they need a place to live now. And so they borrow the money, they get a mortgage, and they're making the payments. As they're making those payments, they're also getting equity on the home. They're getting more and more ownership in what they're buying. But we're talking here is a bond. We can afford to do that. We can afford to do a pay-as-you-go. We're not getting more equity in the village for this. It's just that we're paying a lot of money in interest so that we can get this money and use it faster. And to me, I have a hard time believing that that's the best way to go. So that's just my opinion, and I'll turn it back over to the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions in council? Comments from members of the council? Commissioner Burnett.
Yeah, I'm trying to have this be a dialogue for a workshop. I got a couple, Bill, I hadn't thought through it quite the way you had, so I got a couple questions for you, if you don't mind. Did I understand you to say that you thought Valley View would take about 2 years and Nottingham about 3 if we were doing them in kind of a pay-as-you-go process?
Yes.
So the way you're suggesting that you'd prefer to go forward would be to postpone those, or to do them how? Can you describe that?
No, I did, and it's in the answers from the manager's responses to questions. We would be making a transfer. So those projects can go through, and I believe that would be a problem if we weren't able to address those 2 projects, but we can.
So what kind of number are you proposing that we would spend each year out of current cash flow on what might otherwise be CIP bonded projects?
Well, I haven't seen any pay-as-you-go plans yet, and that's something I've also asked for in the stormwater utility, is that we always assume that we're going to run out and borrow money, and I would like to see a plan. I'd like to see a list of projects and funding sources where we have a pay-as-you-go. I mean, we're talking payments of $1.4 million a year. We're talking about 7 years of just pure interest. And if we readjust and reevaluate some of those projects, maybe we will have to put some off for a couple years, and reprioritize. But in the long run, we'll be able to get 7.5 years worth of additional projects, rather than just going out and having to borrow more money to cover the 7.5 years that we aren't spending because we're paying interest on it. So I'd like to see a pay-as-you-go plan for the so we don't have to borrow that kind of money.
As you see that, do you see any adjustment to the, you mentioned it early on when you were reflecting back, do you see any adjustment to the kind of reserve level policy that we have?
In the reserve policy?
You'd mentioned in the back when we had to cut some stuff, we avoided spending reserve. So if we were trying to do pay-go forward, would you see that adjusted at all? Or do you see it truly as just pure cash flow?
For simplicity's sake, you can look at just cash flow, but I mean, you do have other options. And we do have other options. We just haven't, I don't think we have fully investigated all the options on a pay-as-you-go system. We just kind of assumed, and I realize I'm the minority on this, and when we did financial planning, the group believed that we should go out, and they gave direction to staff to go out and talk about bonding and plan bonding. And I've been a staunch supporter of pay-as-you-go. And that's all I'm saying right now is that I'm still a supporter of pay-as-you-go. I'd like to see a plan as pay-as-you-go. And, you know, if it's a totally unworkable plan and unacceptable, you know, then I can see it. But I haven't, you know, we haven't fully investigated that. And we have a lot of opportunities to raise money. I mean, you know, when we talked about doing 25 or 50 or, you know, I mean, you know, that was all part of the planning. Some people wanted to go 50, some people wanted to go $75 million worth of borrowing. And when you do that, you also have to have a dedicated revenue source so that you can pay these things off. And, you know, we're talking about raising fees, raising taxes, and those kinds of things. And when you go with bonding, I mean, you know, you don't have to take revenue off the table if you want. You know, if you want to raise the revenue, you can still go ahead and raise more revenue or make cuts or do whatever you want to do to match the projects that you need to do. But, you know, why throw it into interest? Why have 7.5 years worth of interest?
Dave, you said that the bonding level proposed by staff requires no additional revenue to service, correct?
That is correct. The revenues for the $25 million bond for the streets were put in place in 2008 as part of a multi-bond issuance plan. And the revenues...
Property taxes.
Yeah, okay, so it's not...
Property
so
tax and home rule
be
sales
needing to
tax.
raise taxes to service this debt, at least...
No adjustments on the revenue side required to implement the second phase of our multi-bond issuance plan.
I'll stop my part of the conversation, let other people talk, but it seems to me everybody would love to save 3% on $35 million, a ton of money. I mean, we've had some of the knockdown dragouts up here for $30,000. But the way I recall, you know, without going back and having my notes in front of me, is that we had kind of collectively decided that the volume of work and the duration in which we wanted to get that work done is what necessitated the idea of borrowing instead of pay as you go, I think. So I suppose we could, you know, hear a proposal to do something different than that. But it wasn't that people were, you know, just sort of without consideration thinking, let's just borrow it instead of pay it. I mean, there was this pretty specific list of stuff in a relatively short duration which required cash up front. My own personal analogy is far more like a home equity loan than a credit card, but I suppose that's probably personality trait differences.
Well, personality traits are decidedly not a proper topic for a workshop. We'd be here way too long. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Schnell.
Just a comment. During our financial planning process, one of the things I remember having heard was the fact that by bonding, we were able to, one, address the worst streets in the community and get them fixed. But more importantly, instead of trying to do $1.4 million or $1.5 million one year, $1.4 million and $1.5 million the next year, and keep a subdivision ripped up for 2 or 3 years at a time, we were able to put all the projects together and, because of economy of scale, get them done in a year, so that the disruption to the residents themselves is limited to just 1 year as opposed to 2 or 3 years if you use the pay-as-you-go program. So I think there are distinct advantages to, I'm not a big bonding fan. I don't like debt, but I think there are distinct advantages to getting the worst streets done and the biggest projects done. But not only that, allowing it to be done in a very timely manner so that disruption to our residents are at a minimum. I mean, anytime you do a huge project, you have disruptions to families, you have kids who would be walking to school who can't walk to school because everything's ripped up. You have all sorts of issues that can come about simply because projects can sometimes go a lot longer. Even the best laid projects sometimes go longer than anticipated. So to me, there's an advantage to getting the money up front and then doing the projects, getting them over with, putting a community or subdivision back together again, and then moving on to the really bad streets again. So, whether it's a 25 million bond or whatever, we all discussed this at length, and 25 seemed to be the amount that was needed to do the worst streets in the community and get them done in a timely manner, and I think that's what staff is attempting to do. In this case, there's really, because of constraints on staff, we can only do 2 big construction projects this year. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the last part of that discussion, Commissioner Schnell, was that we're playing catch-up with these list of, I think it was 7 or 8 subdivisions that had these kind of bases and had fallen into disrepair. We will go back to the pay-as-you-go system once we make this catch-up, and that's the whole part of that street maintenance plan that we've been working on for the last couple of years. So we fell behind based on certain conditions of these streets that existed that weren't of our doing. We now have to fix them to play catch-up to make sure they get addressed in a timely fashion because they're falling apart now. We do the bond, but then after we make our way through these reconstruction projects, we're back to our pay-as-you-go plan. Okay. And that's the whole picture of the plan.
So the intention is not just to continue borrowing and borrowing and borrowing,
that's correct,
but to get to the point where our roads are in a condition where we can then maintain them and not have to continue to borrow. And I think that's an important thing for the residents to understand.
And one more thing to throw in when we talk about the merits of bonding, we're talking about interest rates that are near 3%, and frankly, the inflation costs of these kind of construction projects are right now tracking greater than 3%. So it might actually cost, it will likely cost us more every year we wait going forward, and when there's a spread like that, it's to our financial advantage to actually take a bond that's lower.
But the long-range financial plan that we have in place is to eventually get to, as what Commissioner Waldeck is talking about, is a pay-as-you-go program.
That's
so that correct. We're not going to continue to bond and bond and bond. It's just getting streets to the point where we can actually do something with them and maintaining them.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, we were talking about laddering, though.
Yes.
And at one point, we were going from 25 to 50 to 75. I mean, the conversation was all over. And increasing revenue, various fees and taxes, and trying to dig up what was it, a $3 million gap. That's my fear. Major projects like this, I mean, one of the things I asked for first of all is that I know these 2 projects need to be done, and the pay-as-you-go, there is money in there. We can do the projects and finish them without a 2 or 3 year drag out. I mean, we're just going to go do these projects. The question is the other projects, how we prioritize them, and if it's a $3 million project that needs to be done, and that's next on the priority, and you're putting $1.4 million in payments while you're talking 2 years, so you're basically delaying it for a short period of time and paying it up front rather than having 7 or 8 years of just interest only. And that's a lot of money on the taxpayers. And if we wind up in another economic situation, what's going to happen? I mean, the conversations up here when times were bad is let's not hit the taxpayers. Well, I got my calculator, but I didn't pull it out. But $11 million, I forget what that comes out per tax bill on a $300,000 home, based on what was it, $25 per $1 per 25,000. So do the math. I mean, I'd rather see money go into projects rather than to a bank. And as far as delaying projects and doing a little bit and having disruption, you're going to disrupt. It's not additional disruption on, for example, these 2 projects or the next project. you pay as you go. You put that $1.4 million or 1.2 or 1.6, whatever the interest payments come out, whatever the payments come out to be, you set that aside in a fund, and when you have the money, you go out and do it. You know, that's what a lot of people have to do on the home front. And we have advantages that people don't have in a regular home mortgage. So I'd like to see a pay-as-you-go plan. We haven't, the council hasn't talked about it, and it appears that council would rather do the 25 million. And I understand that, and I understand I'm in a minority in that, but I just thought I'd bring it out again because that's what that's the stand I took in long-range financial planning.
Well, I know Commissioner Neustadt wants to speak, but I would tend to disagree that there's no pay-as-you-go plan out there. There may not be a proposal for doing it, but if you want to see the numbers, it's on the website. I mean, all you have to do is look at our community investment program 2011-2015. Numbers are right there. That's your plan. I'm looking right at it. It's no big secret. I've been talking about it for before I became mayor. The question is how to pay for it. In terms of what dollars do you spend over what period of time, looks to me like there's about $423 million over the next 5 years. So we could pay as we go. And the plan's laid out year by year, project by project, down to great detail. You heard Director Newland use some terms now like WA 033 and things like that. They're all there on the website. I just pulled it up and pulled up a page while I was listening to the conversation. So the plan for that is available. I just want everyone to understand it's not as though this hasn't been discussed and analyzed and we know what dollars and what periods and what projects. That's been out there for a long time. And what we're talking about tonight is do we just pay these dollars over time with existing revenues, which is going to, I think admittedly by anyone's measure, extend out the horizon, if you will, dramatically. And then there's other factors that come in, such as inflation, and you just can list all the different factors you want, or you do it now. But I'll come back to it later. I hijacked Commissioner Neustadt's turn.
Thank you, Mayor. You kind of we've danced around some of the things I want to say. I know when we're talking about bonds, it's hard to take dollars and cents out of the conversation, but some of the points that Commissioner Waldeck has brought up take me back to our long-range financial planning. I think everybody who spoke so far has said that we did have this conversation. We did have the bonding versus pay-as-you-go. I think even Commissioner Waldeck said that we had this conversation back then. Commissioner Schnell spoke of constraints on staff. We have 12 action items. We have the long-range financial plan. We have what may happen today, tomorrow, or the next day that comes up here in our village, and our staff is bound by time. And back in long-range financial planning, options were offered. Council members gave discussion, gave options in their feelings and views and bonding and other options at that time. And the majority came out with the direction to our staff to pursue these bonds and pursue this route this time for these projects. So I think we have to be careful going back to a conversation that we've already had when we've given pretty clear and I believe mostly majority, well, of course it was majority direction to staff. If we start going back on those directives, we're going to get into our position where we're going to have possibly on some issues 7 different proposals, and we won't get any projects done if that happens because there won't be any time for engineering, financial planning, budgeting, and everything else because we'll have to come up with 7 different commissioner style payment programs. So I'm in support of the bonding. We have had this conversation before. I think it's important to stick with the direction that was given back in our long-range financial planning and go forward with these projects. Thank you, Mayor.
I think the other thing that we haven't brought up is in long-range financial planning, when we were talking about the roads, they said that when certain roads were in certain conditions, if you didn't replace them in a timely manner, the cost to replace them was like 3 times, I can't remember the exact figure. So if you do pay as you go, you're going to increase the cost of replacing those roads and get into a big pickle.
Well, let me just say that when they had the, and I'm not trying to, I mean, it'd be nice if we had the conversation. I'd like to see pay as you go. I'm just being consistent. I mean, I brought that up in long-range financial planning.
I don't think anyone's accusing you.
I made the point there, and I don't really expect council to suddenly, oh well, Bill's right. Certainly not, but you know, it's something I happen to believe in. I think we can, it's not as bad. I don't think paying interest for 7 years or 11 years, or depending on what the current interest rate is a good idea. I think it isn't like putting everything off for a long time. You're just setting the money aside and not paying interest. And when you have a $3 or $4 or $10 million project, you set aside the money for it. Like a lot of us have to do in our work lives, in our homes. So, I understand what everybody's saying. I have a different view. I believe in the pay-as-you-go. I'd rather not see it go to interest. And like I say, I'm just being consistent with what I brought up in long-range financial planning.
Mayor, just one quick more point. I just think, Bill, when we talk about you're asking for a pay-as-you-go plan and you're not getting it from staff, there's a reason for that. It's because the staff has worked on this plan. I'm not trying to...
Commissioner, I just stated my view.
Okay.
If you want to go bonding and you want to bring up, that it was in the long-range financial planning, that's fine.
But for those watching, when you say that you've asked for something, you haven't received it, that can be construed as that you're not getting the information you need, when the majority has already said, let's...
Council was gave the marching orders to staff, and I said that.
But I think you've
And
also said tonight that you asked for things that you didn't get. So I just want to be
Well,
real
I didn't
clear.
get it.
I thought the mayor...
And I understand why, and I also stated why. So rather than getting into that, if you want to talk about pay-as-you-go versus bonding, fine. If you want to stop that conversation, fine. But let's not get into,
Well,
Hey, Mayor,
you said you
you're,
didn't get all that, so.
You're pounding away on a calculator over there. I'm surmising you might be telling us what the $423 million would look like if we did it over a long period of time.
Well, actually, I wanted to correct myself because the 423 is over a longer period than what I said, 2011 through 2015. I'm not looking more closely. For the 5-year period, it's $116 million,
Okay.
so I don't want to overstate anything, but the point remains the same. I'll say something. Bill, you are right. I wish we had the kind of funds to be able to, sit in the kitty that we could pay out to not only get back on track, but hedge against inflation, take advantage of very favorable borrowing rates right now, meet the demand and necessity of the village, and not have to borrow anything. I'd love to be able to do that. The problem is that to me this really comes down to 5 different things: planning, demand, necessity, opportunity, and risk. Those are the things that I've heard discussed. First of all, planning. Yeah, this has been planned for some time, because what we do know very well, because I'm looking at the project list, at least through 2015, of what needs to be done. And we know how much it's estimated to cost, and we do the best we can to do that, Mr. Falish. It's not always around the mark. And the problem is that the pay doesn't meet the go. That's the problem. And so we can do pay as you go, but then 2015 now becomes 2025. And then you have to deal with issues like inflation, which was mentioned, increases in motor fuel costs, accelerated deterioration of the situation, not to mention the residents that actually have to live in these areas. And if there's one thing I think we all heard, and I know today's a primary election, but in that last election about a year ago, I think the one thing that everybody heard, we spent any time outside during the campaigns, was the top 3 issues were streets, streets, and streets. And so some of this is trying to respond to demand. Some of it is responding to necessity, because as was mentioned, we are behind and need to be caught up so that we can get back onto a pay-as-you-go model, which is what I heard village management saying, is that we'd like to get caught up so that we can return to a pay-as-you-go. So to me, this isn't a departure or an abandonment of pay-as-you-go. It's getting us back to where we can do that again. My fear is that if we don't get caught up, we'll never be paying. We'll be paying, but we won't be going. That's the problem. And I think we've got this necessity and demand that we have to deal with, responsibly, of course. And this has been planned, and let's face it, there are various balances that have to be conducted. When the comment was made that some people said 25 million, some people said 30 million, some people would like to say 75 million, because yes, ideally you could even borrow more and take advantage of the current environment in terms of cheap borrowing costs and actually get more done. And I guarantee you there are some neighborhoods in town that would like us to do that. There are some projects that have been going on for, I don't know, what, 20 years, that there's some in our community would like to get those finished once and for all, and if we could generate the capital resources to do that, that would be something that I think a number of people would be in favor of. So what it is that you pay and what it is that you go are two things you have to achieve some level of balance, and the planning is where that balance comes out. So that's the planning. The demand and the necessity, I think I've already mentioned, and the other two things are opportunity and risk. What are the opportunities? Well, 3% borrowing rates. Getting something done now at a cost that you know what it is, you're basically fixing it because you're doing the work based on bids that are coming in now as opposed to 5 years from now, when maybe you put the money away. And if inflation outstrips your ability to save on the borrowing, that actually may put you upside down. Now, do we have a complicated financial analysis that shows what the inflationary costs are offset against the borrowing costs and the interest? I'll give you that, Commissioner. I know I don't have that. I haven't seen that. But I do know that we talked about 2 projects tonight that together were $9 million. $9 million. And on a pay-as-go system, we could take the rest of the year off. And I see an awful lot of projects on this list. And I'm not saying that we only have $9 million to do projects, don't get me wrong, but the point remains the same, is that very quickly a couple of projects eat up the entire budget for the year, and then that's it. You can't get anything else done. I see about $116 million worth of projects between now and 2015, and we have some opportunities that we're trying to take advantage of, and that's the 3% borrowing rate, knowing what our costs are today, getting caught up so we can return to a pay-as-you-go system. I view all those as opportunities. What are the risks? Well, anytime someone hears about debt, you think about risks, and you're right. We all have to be careful when we undertake debt of any sort, because there's, I think what they say, there's good debt or bad debt. There's some people say that there's no such thing as good debt. I think the better word is responsible debt. And this debt is going, I mean, you mentioned, well, what happens if the economy turns again? Well, we have existing revenue sources that are dedicated for these principal and interest payments, which I think was pointed out before. That goes a long way towards either eliminating or minimizing the risk of something happening, because there are dedicated revenue streams. This isn't just, oh, we'll make the payment somehow. We are using identified, dedicated revenue streams to pay those interest and principal payments, so they should be resistant, if not, well, nothing's invulnerable, but they should be highly resistant to an economic downturn for that reason. There aren't things that necessarily fluctuate with the economy one way or the other. The one thing that we do know that fluctuates with the economy are the borrowing rates and the favorable bids that we've been receiving. I think Commissioner Rankin mentioned tonight some of the bids are coming in low, so we're able to take advantage of those opportunities. So those are all the factors that I look at, and I agree with you, Bill. I'd love to be able to just write the checkbook and pay for this and not have to borrow anything. The problem is I don't see a viable way to do that without creating a whole new set of risks. And in my view, balancing the risks and the opportunities, I think this is a responsible balancing of those two things to make sure that we're taking care of some of the most high priority projects that we have and taking care of our obligations to the community. It's not just about demand. We know the demand's out there, but I think it's also a matter of necessity. So that's all it comes down to. And I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer. Your points are entirely valid. I just don't see I don't see a practical way to get to where you would prefer to be in the short term. What I do see is this plan as a way to get us to a point where we can better embrace a pay-as-you-go system, which I think everybody would prefer to be doing. That's my opinion. I don't think you're wrong or somebody else is right. I'm just looking at the numbers, and they are what they are.
And I do. I mean, I respect the opinions. It's a difference of opinion, and I respect that. I'm just looking 25 years out, thinking that we could do, what we plan on doing in 25 years, we can do in, 20. Do it a little faster. We will be able to do it a little faster in the long run, but not in the short run. So it's a difference in opinion. I respect it, and I'll be able to leave it at that. I mean, I personally, I'd just rather avoid the debt and get things done in 20 years rather than 25? Or whatever that number comes out to be, we really don't know. Like I say, I respect the opinion, and I did bring this up in long-range financial planning, and I understand the process. I'm being consistent, that's all. Thank you.
I don't begrudge you bringing it up.
Okay. Well.
Makes me go back and look at all this again and realize why we did it in the first place. Other questions, comments? We're still workshopping. Hearing none.
And the good news is we will actually continue this conversation on April 10th and April 17th when the actual bond ordinance comes before the council. So this is just the reimbursement resolution.
Right.
Mayor, the next item and final item on tonight's first reading agenda is a report, information about the Ogden Avenue Site Improvement Strategy, also known as the OASIS program. Tom Daberreiner is going to present the report. If the council sees any issues tonight that they'd like us to consider changing, any elements of the program, please let us know which issues you'd like us to look into, and we will go back to the OASIS team with staff and present some solutions at a further workshop meeting to be scheduled later. So tonight we're hoping to bring everybody up to speed on how it's working and identify any issues for further consideration. Tom?
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Mayor and Council. At the February 14th meeting of the Council, you requested a report regarding the Ogden Avenue Site Improvement Strategy grant program, and I'm going to call it OASIS from this point forward. And here goes. The OASIS program is a matching grant program for certain site improvements along the Ogden Avenue corridor and a specific area of that corridor. Council established this program on September 14th, 2010. The program was developed largely through input from business and property owners along Ogden Avenue, the Economic Development Corporation, and the Chamber of Commerce, with some assistance from village staff, but it's largely EDC and Chamber and the business owners along Ogden. It really grew out of one of the top priorities in the strategic plan to implement the Ogden Avenue Master Plan. The Ogden Avenue Master Plan is, was approved in 1999 or was accepted in 1999, and it had some goals, and we're repeating the goals here on the screen. First of all, to provide more attractive sites along Ogden Avenue, to improve traffic circulation and pedestrian circulation, to improve existing building appearance, and to improve signage and reduce visual clutter through things like burying electrical lines, things like that. Applications under the OASIS grant program would be reviewed by, and are being reviewed by, the OASIS team, which is made up of the business and property owners, several business and property owners, the EDC staff and chamber staff, and then village staff is not a voting member, but we do sit through there and participate in the discussions. The review process is competitive. That is, whatever is coming in at that point is viewed on its own merits against the other applications that come in at the same time. It is a dollar-for-dollar grant program. However, I've got a caveat to that I will point out a little bit later in the presentation. The program indicates that up to $50,000 is available for interior properties less than 1 acre, up to $75,000 for properties that are greater than 1 acre in size or on a corner lot, or with tenant spaces that are especially large. And if you have multiple tasks within your project, within your proposal, as a property owner, there is a 25% bonus of grant monies that could be made available. The eligible categories fall into really 4 categories: site improvements, landscaping, building facades, and signage. There's some detail provided on the screen. You've seen this before for the most part, and it's certainly been in your packets, so we don't want to spend a lot of time on that at the moment. Purchasing policy applies here above $15,000, below $15,000 in terms of requiring village council approval. The area in the blue on this map shows is the TIF district, the Ogden Avenue TIF district, and the OASIS program really is available only to the properties inside the TIF district along Ogden Avenue. There have been 6 submittal deadlines to date, 5 of them prior to this year. No awards have been granted yet this year, even though the submittal deadline was in January. So December 2010 through, and then 4 periods in 2011, 33 projects, 33 applications were reviewed. There were 20 grants awarded based on this. There was $750,000 made available through the TIF in 2011, $350,000 in 2012. This shows the awards that have been made, and the yellow simply shows the properties that receive something in excess of $15,000 for grants. The blue shows properties that receive something less than $15,000 in grants. This summarizes the status of the awards to date, the kinds of projects that were funded. 9 of the 20 projects had site improvements, including sidewalks, screening, parking lot improvements, lighting improvements. 6 of the 20 had landscaping. 8 of the 20 had some kind of building facade element. 17 of the 20 included some kind of new conforming sign. 8 of the 20 projects were sign-only requests, so the 8 comes out of the 17 as well. And this was the one caveat that I was mentioning before. It's a dollar-for-dollar matching program. $409,000, almost $410,000 has been awarded through this program. However, with the business match, the total investment value is more than dollar for dollar. It's $1.3 million to date. 4 projects have been eligible for that 25% bonus. So that is a pretty significant investment into Ogden Avenue at this stage of the program. This breaks down some of the funding, again, some of the grants. 75% of the funding has gone to projects that have multiple tasks involved, multiple projects on their properties. 15% involve projects that just have perhaps one project, one task involved, but does not include a sign, and 10% of the projects of the money went towards sign-only projects. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. The partners aren't here to help me, but I'll do the best that I can on this one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tabor-Reiner. Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to the OASIS grant program from the audience? Just looking behind the post, just to make sure. Questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Burnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I just, one subject I'd like to revisit collectively a little later down the road if we could. I think the plan itself is working, and that some of the testament is the amount of private investment that's kind of been spurred by this. But when we originally put this program into place, there was some question, trepidation, and maybe is the right choice of words, with a couple of us, I think, on the idea of sign-only projects. And I think what we wanted to do was get it rolling and see how it worked out and what kind of projects came out of it. I think that there's unquestionably, you can't classify this as anything other than a success as a program. But I still would like to revisit that if my colleagues are up for it in the near future, the element about sign-only work. That still doesn't sit real well with me. And I guess I'm feeling like, based on what's on the screen there, we'd still be getting a whole lot of stuff done that make big improvements to the area, even if we weren't doing sign-only work. So Mayor, that's a workshop kind of a question. I'd like to talk about that later if the rest of you are willing.
See what everybody else has to say. Commissioner Schnell? I know what my view is.
I've got actually two things. As long as you're looking for things to investigate and talk to the business community about. One, going to the sign-only. If we were to continue a sign-only program, I guess, from my perspective, I'd like to see the possibility of enhancements to the landscaping itself. Right now, there doesn't appear to be a lot of landscaping that goes in when it's a sign-only project, and if indeed we are to continue that, and that's an if, could we look at what could be done? Well, beautification of Ogden Avenue was important, so could we get a feeling for perhaps what other things could be done to make it more aesthetically pleasing? Instead of a couple of plants here or there, maybe making it look better.
Yes.
And get that. So I don't need an answer now. That's just.
I think what we'll do is we'll take a look. I have a feeling there's going to be a direction here to take a look at the sign-only aspects, and we'll give you a bunch of options when we come back,
Right.
from eliminate to enhance other components to changes in the equation and the leveraging. So, yes, we'll take a look at all those with the team.
The other thing that I think everybody up here knows, Ogden Avenue sidewalks has always been a really big thing with me for 20-some-odd years. And right now, one of the components of this is that an easement or a sidewalk needs to be put in. What I'd like to have you investigate also is, instead of not just an easement, but instead of the easement, if perhaps matching funds could be used to actually start putting the sidewalk in. I know some sidewalk has been put in, but getting an easement is not getting the sidewalk done. And in the winter in particular, it makes me really nervous watching people walk in the street. But right now, there are more and more people who are bicycles and are actually trying to traverse Ogden Avenue with a sidewalk that comes and goes. And if indeed we could, instead of requiring an easement, require the sidewalks actually going in, then I guess I'd like to know how many easements have we gotten, how much sidewalk would it have been, and if we were to do that, could we have done some of the gaps?
Sure.
So I get it. I want to get a better handle on the easement idea versus just making them put a sidewalk in.
We'll do that as well.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this OASIS program has been working pretty well. I guess the one question I have is, during the review process, which is pretty stringent, I mean, there's a lot of people in the room making sure that these all fit the criteria. I believe I've asked this before, I just looked and I didn't see it. Is there a priority given for projects that have more components to them during an application period? So for example, you have two projects. One has site improvement, sign, sidewalk, easement, everything, and one is just a sign. That's not a great example because you only have a certain amount of dollars allotted, but is there a prioritization for projects if there's multiple projects and only one or two components?
There's not a prioritization per se, however, it is eligible for a 25% bonus and as an incentive, as an encouragement to do more than one project.
In addition to that, there was a prioritization in the timing of the applications. We didn't even consider any sign-only applications until the third round.
Okay.
So there was a prioritization in that sense.
Gotcha.
And then Tom's right as far as the incentive, not prioritization on the other.
So as far as Commissioner Barnett's question, I'm fine with having the conversation about options for signs only or no sign only moving forward. But as it stands now, I could continue with the program as it's set up. I really appreciate the review component with the different members of our business community and our own staff in there. So I think that's important to note, that it's not just put in your application and get it. We just saw a slide tonight that 33 were put in and only 20 grants were awarded. So there is area for review and for denial, actually, which is not what we want, but I think it's been working pretty well. And I'll look forward to more conversation, but if we had to keep going, I would be okay with that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Rankin?
I have a few questions. I think you answered one of them. So the grants that are under $15,000, they're still reviewed by the OASIS team and then sent to Manager Fieldman?
Correct.
Okay. This nice graph you gave us with the projects, the address, all of that, could we add columns that say the project's been completed, and then I know that there's like a 18-month window or something, maybe the date, so we would know how close these people are, because even though they've been awarded, or they've been told that they've been awarded, they haven't been, a lot of people haven't done the work and received the money yet, right?
Yeah, we will add a status on that, and I think the next time we come back to you, we'll come with some pictures as well, because some of them are nearing completion.
Okay. And then, at each review period, is there a cap amount? Do you say we're going to award 50,000, or is it just based on what's coming in and what's approved?
Right. No, that's first come, first served. It's part of the competitive process. If you're in early with a good-sized project, you could eat up a chunk of the budget. So.
Okay. I have to say that I think that sign applications should still continue to be considered. I would be open to maybe changing the percentage of their coverage. So if it's a sign only, maybe instead of getting a dollar for dollar, it's a different percentage. Just something to throw into the mix, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you. Before I get off on Commissioner Schnell touched on something when we talk about landscaping, if we could be a little more specific and not just, throw dirt down on a couple of flowers and qualify for a multiple request. Let's nail that down a little bit. I know the committee, when we were talking about the sign ordinance, wanted to continue funding signage with the OASIS program. It's a great program, and I think for the most part it's doing what it's supposed to. I haven't seen any abuse or a lot of abuses there. But we get into category 4. It sounds like a hurricane, and that's signage. I've spoken before about wanting to stop paying for signage because we had this mandate that we would, we gave a deadline that would come up, what was it, May 1st or May 7th or something like that. And then we continued it. So in a sense, we were rewarding people who waited. I would like to see the sign portion of it come to a halt. Or, like I say, the whole idea is to be fair to those people who got the unfunded mandate and said, okay, I better go out and get a sign regardless of economic times, and they ran out and got a sign at their own cost. Maybe if people want to continue signage, maybe what we ought to do, and maybe staff can look into this for the next conversation, is the possibility of going retroactively to the people who are mandated to get signs before the OASIS program, and maybe if they can prove that that they purchased the sign, after we issued the mandate, that maybe they should get something for being good corporate citizens and doing what they were supposed to do, now that we have a partially funded mandate. So, just a thought, is that idea clear enough there?
Yes, and we
Okay.
talked earlier today about that, so we have some
All
notes
right.
on that.
And that's all I have.
Thank you. Well, I would appreciate having further discussion or proposals from staff with respect to the sign-only component of the OASIS grant program. I personally have never been a big fan of that concept, and for some period of time was under the disillusionment that it wasn't possible, but was straightened out on that. At a minimum, I would want to have something in there that, I think there's, what was it, the downtown pattern book, there was a phrase that was once turned a couple times about certain materials being disfavored. At a minimum, I would want to have something in there like that, because I think it's a matter of managing expectations. I think it's a matter of managing expectations for potential participants, with respect to those who are conducting the review and the analysis and making the recommendations, and also members of the council as we continue to go forward with this program. So whatever we end up doing, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I think it's important that we have consistent expectations across the board in terms of what is going to be embraced and what is going to be discouraged. And just my own opinion is that sign-only projects should be discouraged. If there are ways to do that, either through carrots or sticks, that's fine. I'm open to all that. I understand that it's a practical matter. It hasn't exactly been a raging problem, but since this is one that we can see and perhaps anticipate could be, then we ought to head it off and manage expectations. So I would welcome that conversation as suggested by Commissioner Barnett.
we will, based on tonight's discussion and direction, meet with the OASIS team to give the council some further options on sign funding, landscape requirements, and sidewalk construction. So we'll go forward and get back to you shortly on those 3 items.
Sidewalk construction, pay as you go with sidewalk construction has taken about, what, 20 years?
That's at least.
100.
No, it's 20.
It's always political will.
And
Money.
that ends the first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
If I could will the sidewalks into being, I would. Unfortunately, they want money for that concrete. All right, thank you very much. That brings us to the mayor's report. And just a couple of things there. First of all, continued update with respect to ComEd reliability. The weekly update is to our continuing efforts to maintain and enhance the reliability of electrical service to Downers Grove residents, both residents and businesses, since our town hall meeting with ComEd last fall. This week's update. I feel like I should say previously on the ComEd update. Catch people up.
In our next episode.
This week's update. Village staff continues to work with ComEd to track progress on the final 2 equipment replacement projects that were identified during the reliability review in the summer of 2011. ComEd has notified the village staff that work is beginning on these 2 projects this month. Well, they certainly can't complain about the weather. As the spring and summer storm seasons approach, remember those? Village staff will continue to work with ComEd to ensure that they provide responsive customer service should outages occur. Question I have, and shame on me for not looking into this myself, but with the new protocol that is winding its way to implementation in terms of what will and will not happen during extreme weather events or prolonged outages, perhaps once that's a little bit more well-defined, we can share that in some way with our residents so they know how that's going to work. I've mentioned it periodically. It can be a somewhat daunting topic, and when the appropriate time comes, especially on the cusp of storm season, perhaps we can try to translate that into everyday language.
We do speak ComEd, and we will translate for everyone. And there is a meeting on Thursday at DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference on this very topic, and we will report out at the next council meeting.
Perfect. I think everyone would appreciate that, because there will be some changes that are coming forward, and if everyone understands the broader infrastructure, the information action plan that has been developed and is being implemented, I think that would be helpful. The only other item I want to mention is, speaking of DuPage Mayors and Managers, unless something happens to my schedule, I am planning on making a trip down to Springfield with some other local mayors as part of the DuPage Mayors and Managers contingency next week. Coincidentally, it works out. We don't have a council meeting next week, so I'm going to still be at work, though, on behalf of the village by going down to Springfield and continuing to advocate for some of the not only the shared issues that we have with our other peers in DuPage Mayors and Managers, but also I've asked Manager Fieldman that I want to pick up on the same topics that Commissioner Barnett and Manager Fieldman, as well as Michael Casa in the chamber, went down on not too long ago. I think that strategy of continuing to hit the nail repeatedly with the hammer in the same spot is more effective than, what do they say, sometimes a shotgun blast can be more effective than a sniper's bullet. Just mull on that metaphor for a while. And that's all I have for the mayor's report. That brings us to the manager's report.
No report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Village attorney's report.
Only one item to present this evening, Mayor, and that's an ordinance amending certain water rates. That is all.
Thank you. Brings us to council member reports and new business. Start with Commissioner Barnett.
I have nothing this evening, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Durkin.
I have no report.
Commissioner Schnell.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Newstead.
No report, Mayor.
Wow. Commissioner Rankin.
I just wanted to ask if we could put something on the website about leaf pickup. I saw lots of folks with their leaves out. I know it starts April 1st.
Starts April 1st. We had a lot of questions in the neighborhood while I was out raking, and we will put a reminder on our website.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week, Commissioner Newstead and I attended the opening of the Wig Boutique at the Cancer Center at Good Samaritan Hospital that's operated by the American Cancer Society. Beautiful wigs, and they have such an impact on the patients. It was a good event. Commissioner Newstead represented the village, made a few appropriate comments. did a good job there, and just a well worthwhile use of resources, because for those people who do have suffer cancer and have the hair problems that come with it, it's just such a change in their lives, and also the way people react when they see others. These wigs are so realistic. You know, for people who are dealing with them, you know, on a business or day-to-day basis. So when you look at them and you treat them not like somebody who has cancer, but you look at them as your boss, as your coworker, as a mom, as a grandma, rather than somebody who has cancer. And just a great event. And thank Commissioner Neustadt for his comments. Thanks.
And thank you both for attending and representing the village and village council. Greatly appreciate it. Just a few things for my report out. First of all, I just want to thank the Downers Grove South High School baseball teams, the baseball boosters and the coaching staff. I was pleased and privileged to be a guest at their 6th annual dinner auction, The Luck of the Mustang, which was designed to raise money for Mustangs baseball. And not only was I a guest, but they put me to work, because, you know, these are austerity measures these days. You don't just get to show up as a guest, you actually have to do something. So I served as their guest auctioneer. And so I assumed that the first 10 people they sought out to invite couldn't make it, and so they ended up asking me. But I have to tell you that being an auctioneer is a lot tougher than it looks. It was a unique experience, but we were able to raise a fair amount of money for Mustangs baseball, and it was a great night. Following another event, and also on the eve of St. Patrick's Day, so there was a lot going on, and I was glad to support Mustangs baseball in that regard. Second of all, I want to, of course, extend appreciation, commiseration, and congratulations, regardless of the result, on all those who are currently awaiting the results of tonight's primary election. All of us up here know the trials and tribulations that go into running for public office, and anyone that actually puts themselves out there to do it knows that it can oftentimes be a challenging but yet rewarding thing to do. So I want to again extend my appreciation to all the candidates who have thrown their hats in the ring and are out there nervously waiting the results of tonight's election, and congratulate them on what they've accomplished regardless of what the outcome is. And finally, of course, as that point in time marches ever sooner, there are in fact only 92 days left until Rotary Growth Fest. And with that, I have nothing further. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you and good night.
I forgot to wear his tie.